Hi everybody, this is Steve Tinker, and this is my presentation for my final presentation for GO 102, and I'm doing it on the political and economic crisis in Venezuela. So, a little bit of history about Venezuela. It's it's in South America, obviously, with its northern border on the Caribbean Sea, and it's also bordered by Brazil, Guyana, and Colombia. Um, from 1522 until 1824, Venezuela was a Spanish colony until Simon Bolivar, a revolutionary leader, led them to independence from Spain. When he did that, he created the country called Gran Colombia, which was a combination of Ecuador, uh, Colombia, and Venezuela. So that didn't last long. By 1830, Gran Colombia had already broken up and became the three separate countries that we know today. The geography of Venezuela is home to some of the most unique geography in the whole world. It's located at 6 degrees north latitude, so it's a very hot, muggy, tropical climate, a lot of rainforest and things like that. It has what's called teepees, which are they're huge mountains, but they're flat tabletop mountains, and on the tops of those mountains, they're massive, so they support some of the most unique and isolated animal and plant species in the whole world. It's also home to Angel Falls, which is the highest waterfall in the world at 3,212 feet high. Demographics for Venezuela is the total population. There are 28,644,603 people, but 88% of the population is urban, and it's located in the northern and western highlands, around with their capital city being Caracas. Uh, Religion wise, they inherited from Spain, much like the rest of Central and South America. Their main religion is Roman Catholic, 96%, with the other 4% being Protestant, and then your indigenous religions, because there still is indigenous people that live in the rainforest and things like that there. Their economy. Their economy depends heavily on oil exports. It's their number one commodity, and it always has been. They they produce and ship out a lot of oil. They actually sit on the world's biggest proven oil reserves. So they're ranked, but do well. They're ranked 47th in the world for the purchasing power parity, and it's his 2018 his total GDP was less than the state of Connecticut. So they got some major issues going on right now, and big part of that is their inflation rates. They, due to their economy and kind of they're a socialist country. The government has driven down the cost of so many products artificially, like gas and oil, things like that too, to its inside the country, that their inflation is up to, estimated at 10 million%. They don't publish what their inflation rates are to the world, but that's what economists and other people, that's the estimate, that it's up 10 million%. So that means something that at one time cost $1 now costs 10 million Venezuelan bolivars is their currency. For an example, a roll of toilet paper here in the U.S. costs 40 cents. In Venezuela, it's like 2.6 million bolivars. So their inflation is through the roof. It's crazy. But a lot of that inflation, or because of that it's caused a lot of the industry and businesses in Venezuela, they've had to shut down, and they can't operate because the government doesn't allow them. the government tells them what their prices are going to be. So it costs them more to operate than they do get profits on their products. So there's a massive amount of unemployment and poverty and things like that. Like I said, the government is a socialist government, and that started in 1999 when Hugo Chavez, who was a revolutionary leader of his own, took power, and he's the one. He began running the country on socialist policies. A lot of everything government run, and he began driving down the cost of products, and that's what started kind of its downfall. The current leader of Venezuela is President Nicolas Maduro, and he was actually a protege and of Hugo Chavez, and he was really kind of handpicked as his successor. Even though President Maduro was elected, they do have, it's not a dictatorship per se. They have elections, where people vote, but there's both times he's been elected and reelected, but with both times of accusations of, illegal activity, tampering with elections, ousting political opponents, things like that. So, yeah, kind of typical of that kind of government, I suspect. What makes this interesting is in January 23rd of 2019, the opposition leader named Juan Guaido, who was he's actually the leader of Venezuela's National Assembly, declared himself the acting president in an attempt to oust Maduro. Um, while this was, and he does have a lot of public support, he's basically virtually powerless. He can't do anything. In 2017, Maduro created what was called the National Constituent Assembly, and he basically filled it with all his supporters and backers, and they're the ones that basically rendered the National Assembly powerless, whom Guaido is the leader of. But nevertheless, he declared himself the acting president, and actually 50 plus countries, including the United States, recognize him as Venezuela's president and not Maduro. But like I said, there's just not a lot Guaido can do. He doesn't have that much power. And the biggest thing is, if you're trying to overthrow the leader of a country, oftentimes you got to have the military backing you, and Maduro still has the Venezuelan army backing him, and this is due to, he gives them extra benefits and pay increases and things like that. Also, which doesn't help the situation, is Russia, China, Iran, and Turkey are among a minority of countries, but still important countries that support Maduro as the president, with even Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, speaking out and saying, that the opposition to Maduro is wrong, because he's duly elected, and that it goes against democracy. But that's not much coming from him. Solutions to the problems. The U.S. has a lot of sanctions against Venezuela. Drive down their economy, which that's working. But the Venezuelan people must be willing to act and fight for the future of their country if they really want to change. And also some of the surrounding Latin American nations, could step in and provide support for that. But other than that, there's, if the people there aren't willing to fight for change, then, things are going to go status quo, and things aren't getting any better. So that's kind of the situation going on in that part of the world right now. Thanks for listening. That was my presentation.